Thanks for joining, everybody. We tried this once, what was it, week and a half ago, and I was out in my pole barn, and the Wi-Fi just wasn't working, so we're just going to do it here in my house. That way I know I have a good connection. And
well, I think it was conspiracy between the lizard people and the Illuminati. I said I think it was the Illuminati and the lizard people working against us. That's what I think.
Yeah, we're getting too close to the truth, dude. Once that happens, they shut you down, you know. But yeah, the whole purpose for this video is to talk to Ace, talk to him about Delta to Alpha, and the projects that he has coming up, the knives that we have available on the website, all that jazz. So where do you want to get started this time? I'll let you just take off.
We'll start right from the get-go where we did last time, because I don't know how bad the quality was. So
okay. So yeah, I guess we'll just start from the beginning. How did you get into throwing, and what is your purpose with Delta to Alpha, with knife throwing and whatnot?
Sure. So how did I get started with knife throwing? Is that what the question is?
Yeah.
All right. Well, like most kids growing up in a rural area, I saw someone throw a knife on a movie and decided to promptly go to my backyard and figured I could do it. Grabbed the closest knife that looked like it would fit the bill, which happened to be my dad's hunting knife. And after beating the ever-living Jesus out of it off some plywood and the fence and rocks, I wound up getting my ass kicked. And then I had to spend the next, the next or the rest of the weekend trying to put an edge back on it. And so, I mean, as you'd imagine, I knew 2/3, about 4/5 of nothing about it, right? Right. And then so a little while later, after I got an edge on that knife, and the hide on my rear end was healed up, I went to was in the city, and we stopped at a knife store, and I saw some throwing knives, and I mean, they were, I don't know if they weighed 50 grams each, right? The standard stainless steel made in China that everyone starts with, right? You get 3 of them for like $5 or whatever, and the case it came in is probably worth more than the knives are. And I couldn't stick them worth a good goddamn. And then I wound up being, a few years later, going into a surplus store and found a full tang knife that had a hole in it. It was made in China too, stainless steel. It was a variation of the Gerber Mark II. And it was the first knife that I could ever throw and stick well. And to this day, I mean, I can still pick it up and drop it in a half spin whenever I want to, right? As is the knife you first love. But I mean, full disclosure, it was made by United Cutlery, and it's still hot garbage. It was hot garbage then, but never broke. And then moved away when I was from the rural place that I grew up in to the big city of, I don't know, 200,000 people, and I had an opportunity to learn ninjutsu. So there I obviously got to learn how to throw shuriken and spikes and stuff like that, because throwing stars are illegal in Canada. It's the same charge for having a stun gun as it is a throwing star. It's about 3 years in jail, potentially, if you get the full caseload thrown at you. And considering it's only 7 if you kill somebody, like a manslaughter charge is 7 years. So 3 years for throwing stars, a little heavy-handed fire standards. And when I was in the Bujinkan at the Ninjutsu dojo, throwing shuriken and stuff like that, throwing knives, was just kind of an afterthought. There was a few guys that kind of messed around with it, but I mean, no one was very good, right? Like if you were sinking them in,
it wasn't a major part of the curriculum, right?
No, like if you were consistent at 10 feet, I mean, you were king of the blind, right? Right? You had the dyslexic leading the retarded, and I mean, everyone thought it was great. So, and then going on a little bit later, I wound up getting some videos and doing some training with a guy named Jim Keating, and he talked about Bowie knives and throwing Bowie knives. So when we were talking about doing the gambler's toss and the gunslinger toss, he was the first one that I saw talk about it publicly. But when I was growing up and I was throwing knives in the old man in the backyard, and the old man had finally forgiven me for wrecking his hunting knife, and I had my own. He came in the backyard and asked me how it was going, and I said, "Oh, like if you take the knife and you hold it here, right? It's about this distance, and just kind of like basic stuff." He's like, "Oh, interesting." And he goes, "Can I see?" Took the knife, tossed it around, and just pitched it underhand, went straight into the target at like 6 feet, and I was just like. But like considering what I was doing, that was amazing. And I was just like, "How did you?" He's like, "Yeah, gotta go." And so it's like, huh.
Yeah.
And then just kind of like, oh, okay. And then when I was younger, I was in a uniform. We're getting ready to do something called Ceremony of the Flags, which is a big rifle drill marching kind of presentation on one of the government buildings for Canada Day, which is July 1st. And I was walking around in uniform, and a little old man came up to me and the guy that I was with a grumble, and he started talking to us about fighting in the war. And he seemed really young. And he talked about throwing knives and like he could just pick something up and just throw it. But he seemed young for all the World War II veterans that I had met. And so like me being me, I mean, like growing up where I did and kind of being in cadets and stuff like that, we did lots of stuff with the Legion. So I was like, well, you seemed really young for a World War II veteran. And when I asked about that, I said, "Sir, I beg your pardon, what war?" He said, "World War II." And I was like, and where I grew up, every old man just has this generic grumble, right? They just kind of have this generic accent that you have when you're over 65 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, "You look really good for your age." But in Canada, right, like we referred to as the shock troops of the Commonwealth, right? There was kids that went over 14, 15, 16 years old.
Okay.
I was like, I said, "How old were you when you went?" He said, I was about 11 or 12. And I was like,
What?
"Oh." I was like, "Who did you fight for?" He goes, "The Germans." And I was like, "Oh, you were in the Hitler Youth."
No
And he
shit.
goes, "No, I was in the SS." And I was like, "What?" And he told me this story about how they were in the schoolyard at whatever the equivalent of recess is in 1930s Germany. He said these men in dark uniforms were walking around with the headmaster, the principal, at recess, pointing to the boys who were athletic and bigger and stronger for their age. He said, "Before the end of the day, we were all called down to the office and we never saw our families again." I was like,
Damn.
and this was, and I mean, it happened towards the end of the war and stuff like that as the Germans were pushed back in. And I was like, And he said, we weren't, and I mean, the man was a child, right? Like, it's not like there was a choice, right? And he said, we weren't trained, we were conditioned. So what do you mean? He said, if you were to be, he said, there's things that I can do that I can't teach you. I don't know how to do them. And he said, like, as an example, you could put the parachute and the uniform on me, take me up in the plane. He said, and give me the orders. He said, I'd immediately know what to do. He said, but I don't know what that order is anymore. I just know that I would do it the way that a dog would do it, right? So yeah. I was like, well, I'm like, well, what else? He said, well, to this day, I can pick up anything, like I can pick up a knife or anything and just toss it and sticks. He said, if it's within 15 feet, he said, I can just pick up anything that's got some semblance of a point, butter knife, machete, Bowie knife, hatchet, whatever. I can just pick it up and throw it. I was like, how? He goes, I don't know. I just. And so it was the first time that I had ever heard, and I was 18 years old. It was the first time I had ever heard of somebody being able to do that. And I said, well, like half spin or like how do you, like, what do you mean? He said, depends. He said, like, maybe. He said, I just do it. I don't know. And it was the first time that I had ever talked to anyone that explained it that way, right? Like, all the info I could find, there was a couple of books, obviously the Gil Hibben book and a couple other ones that were available from United Cutlery. There was one that was really long and skinny. It had blue writing. It had this, I think it was a Filipino gentleman on it. Started with a P, like Canada Man. I'm sure you know what I'm saying. And he would talk about, exact same stuff, palm placement, all that. But it was the first time that anyone ever talked about just being able to do it, and it was a feeling. And it stuck with me. And then later on, right, I mean, just kind of play with it here and play with it there. And I had to break a horse because I'd met a girl, and she had a horse, and I needed to break a horse, so I go riding with her. So as a part of that, I had to learn how to use a bullwhip. And I learned to use an Australian-style bullwhip. An Australian bullwhip versus a American bullwhip, the biggest difference is the handle length. Mm-hmm. So when you throw it, right, you cast, right, and it creates this loop. And, started looking into a guy named Anthony DeLongis and how he was using his whip. If anyone wants to use a whip, Anthony DeLongis' video is the best one that's out there. And the girl I was dating, her brother, they were Mennonites, her brother actually used to perform with a whip, right? You could have a cigarette hanging out of your mouth, he'd knock the cherry off it, right? He'd go through, he'd stand there, he could go through and crack the whip and wrap it around your neck, right? He could do all sorts of stuff. A whip in each hand, doing different things, blah, blah, blah. Really, really cool. So picked up some tricks from him. And we were just hanging out one day, and I was like, you ever thrown a knife? He said, it's just like a bullwhip. And I was like, huh. And so he picked up a knife and chucked it just the same way he used a bullwhip. I was like, so screwed around with it, and started to kind of get some semblance of it. And now I was sticking him, 10 feet. I could pick up a knife and make that stick consistently. I was pretty proud of myself. And honestly, didn't play with it much for a couple of years, maybe 5-10 years. I just, once a year, something like that, twice a year, I'd, pick up a butter knife and stick it into a wall or a cardboard box or something, right?
Yeah.
And then, for whatever reason, about 2020, 2019, I saw Holtman. He was throwing some knives and stuff like that, and he was throwing nose fillets. That's interesting. I'd done that, but there was something different about what he was doing. And they're flying like darts, right? So everyone's well familiar with it now, right? Instead of it like quarter turning, it would just, and I was like, huh. So I followed him, and I'm like, there's something going on here. This is going to catch on. People are going to be interested. Then I ran into you, and kind of my buddy's kid wanted to throw knives and stuff like that. And it all just kind of started coming together. So I was like, well, yeah, dust mine off. I think I had like 10 or 12 left over somewhere in a box from when I was a kid. Brought them over to my buddy's house and showed his kid how to do it, and ran into you and kind of like following you a little bit. Designed a knife that was basically better than what my buddy's kid had, and had a bunch made just so that we could have cheap knives. And that's kind of how we got the J7. And I mean, during the pandemic, people were locked down, just wanted a project. They wanted to wrap the handles or something like that. So I'm like, well, you could throw this in your apartment at a pizza box, right? 10 feet, 3 meters, everyone's got it in their apartment. If your life sucks, at least you can make it suck a little bit less. You can make this and have a hobby and kind of pimp it out and do that stuff, right? So kind of started there, and I was following you for a while, and I got a hold of you and offered you to send you one. And I knew that you liked stuff that had a big ass on it. You liked it to be 10 inches long, and you liked it to weigh, at least 200 grams. And the J7 was none of those things. None of those things.
How long is that knife? Is that knife 8 inches long?
I have one floating. It is. Well, here's it next to the Danger Dashing.
Okay, so it might be 9.
Yeah, I mean, it's not 10 for sure. In inches, it is, let's go to Taylor's tape here. It's 8.5 inches.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
Right, so I sent one to you, and I knew that you were going to just hate everything about it.
Yeah,
and so I'm like, okay, well, let's see what he does. Right, and I mean, we're chit-chatting, you're like, I hate it. but like, I can't tell you that I hate it. So like, I was like, well, I mean, okay, well, what can we do better? Like, let's, right? And you're like, basically throw it in the garbage. And I was like, well, can you show me what's wrong with it? And then you tried to show me how terrible it was and stuck it 5 for 5 at like 5 meters. And I was like, well, it's clearly not that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was deliberately trying to make it look bad, and I stuck it every fucking throw.
And the moral of the story is don't try.
Well, and it's really interesting because I still don't think that's a good knife, but it's kind of morphed into what has become the Tengu Kudaki, which seems to be a very popular knife. People are stoked on that now. Right there. Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, we wound up my kind of having a design background, engineering background. I always see things like this as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn, right? So what is Delta 2 Alpha? Delta 2 Alpha is my giant self-directed education, right? Whatever it is I wind up getting interested in, I research the hell out of it so that I can continue learning. And so my kind of shtick was like looking around, I was like, okay, well, based on the ninjutsu roots, based on kind of some of the stuff that I'm seeing, being involved in the EDC community, right? Because I talked to you and you're like, minimum length of a throwing knife has got to be 10 inches. 10 inches, 10 inches, 10 inches, right? I mean, 10 inches is on the small side. And it's like, 10 inches on the small side? Tough crowd. Okay. Yeah. So looked at it as, let's figure it out. Let's design around it. I see this as a challenge. And, right, I mean, the conversation of being around it, right, is throwing a knife a valid self-defense thing? Well, you need to be small enough to carry it, right? So we knew the ones that were small enough to carry were kind of hot garbage, quite frankly, right? They're typically the cheap Chinese ones that would break if they actually did that well, right? If you could stick them.
And they're super light as well.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, fast forward to today, right? Like, right, there's a bunch of people watching this stream, you and I included, that can pick up those knives and belt them in there. But it's pretty advanced. It's an advanced skill to be able to throw that. So we kind of looking at it, I'm like, okay, I want to go through and build something that isn't terrible, that isn't hot garbage, that's small enough to be able to carry. And by carry, I mean conceal. So we're kind of stuck around that 8.5 inches overall. And that's kind of how you and I wound up getting hooked up.
Yep. And the first few shorter knives that we were messing with was the dashi shape that ended up being the 8.5 of Danger. But in the beginning, we were messing around with 1/4 inch stuff. And I actually really enjoyed that, but it didn't have the knockdown power that the 8.5 is. And I give all that credit is to you for wanting to go really thick. And at the beginning, I was really skeptical because everybody was getting into the thicker stuff, but at the time I hadn't had anything. And after the first 1 or 2 that you sent me, I was like, damn, we're really onto something. It packs a huge punch.
Just hold that sec. I'm actually going to grab one of those 1/4 inch ones.
Oh, you still have some?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So this is one of the originals. This is the 1095. It's, still got the patina on it from the heat treatment. And here's the thing. These things don't kid yourself. They're amazing. They work really, really well.
I had a lot of fun with them. I did. But for a self-defense knife, I mean, almost nothing is better than that 8.5, man. It's so badass in that short little devastating package.
Well, and it kind of wound up like there's a few things that led to the 8.5 kind of coming around, right? So there was the search that we were getting into for the shorter knife, right? Like, right? No, we need something that's going to be able to literally fit in a pocket, about the size of a fruit knife, right? Needed something that fit that. And so initially we were looking at the 1/4 inch, maybe we could do 5/16 or something like that. And you can blame or thank the coronavirus because when we were looking to do it, we had a choice between 1095 in 1/4 inch, which, I mean, 1095, if you know how to heat treat it, can be a great steel. If you don't, it's going to shatter like glass.
Right.
Or we could get 80 CRV in 3/8 of an inch, and which is right about 9.5 millimeters if we have anyone there that's metric. Right, so we had 6.5 millimeters or 9.5 millimeters. That was what we had the option of. And I just thought to myself, well, 1095 is not that interesting. Fuck it. If you're going to send it, bend it. So it wound up kind of coming about just like champagne, right? Like it was just, right? The success of the 8.5, there was this whole Charlie Foxtrot of weird events that kind of came together. Me sending you a knife that I knew you were going to hate. Right, me, right? You saying like, oh, yeah, we got to go at least 10 inches. I was like, yeah, but what if we don't? Like let's do it 8.5. And like, right? Like I was like, okay, fine. Well, just like scale it down for me. You got a vector file, and then we'll do it in 1/4 inch. And then I'm like, 1/4 inch steel is pretty Massamanos. It's pretty average, but we can get this 80 CRV in 3/8. What do you think? You're like, I was like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, with that, we've kind of seen a bit of a trend. I mean, partly it's just knives that we've done, whether it's the 8.5 inches of danger. We have the Tengu Kadaki. One of your favorites, the reiteration of the J7, which is, here's the thing, it sticks even better, right? Thicker, right? We had the Kadaki lineup, Bodashi, and then for me, the reward is always seeing other people riffing on your idea. Because if nobody is riffing on your idea, if nobody is going through and trying to do what you do, you're either out of their league completely, which, I mean, let's face it, is a little bit far-fetched, right? Or it's a terrible idea. So,
right,
for me, going through and seeing, people riffing on that type of stock thickness, that's cool, right? Going through and looking at the, the compact, subcompact lineups in which, right, we wind up seeing as an example, the bullet train that we helped I Like Knives bring together, right? Yeah. Which is, I mean, let's face it, it's very, very similar in nature. It's just got a little bit different affectation, right?
I can throw that just the same.
You got one showing up, should be there the Wednesday for sure. Okay. And yeah, it'll fly right through a cantaloupe, right? And so you wind up looking at these things, you're like, we had a good idea, and now we're seeing the community kind of coming together and be like, yeah, we dig that, right? And other makers riffing on it. And for me, that's one of the biggest, when I look back on what's the contribution that our partnership with you has had, right? How have we changed the look of the landscape? Nobody was doing subcompacts before. They just weren't. It was seen as throwing knives, self-defense thing is a pipe dream in movies. It's small ninja shit, right? And we came together and I said, well, what if it's just an equipment issue? What if it's just an equipment issue?
Yeah.
And so now it's like, now we're seeing those, right? The only person that was really doing a throwing knife that was being expressly marketed as you could EDC this and you could smite the unwashed and the evil, right? With it was Jason Johnson.
Yep.
Right. Sabertooth, baby tooth.
And his knives are fantastic, but it's a totally different thing. Those are actual knives that you can throw.
Yes, they are.
We made a throwing knife as an EDC. So it's similar, but way different as well.
Well, and I mean, when you start going through and looking at like the Libre guys and the proliferation of point-driven tools, like this as a point-driven tool is very well suited with that bulb, right? Very nice to hang on to for a variety of reasons. So as far as fitting the self-defense sphere, it does that, right? It can be driven as, right, it's small enough to be used as a point-driven tool. It's pointy enough to go through it, like it's pointier than, well, it's about as pointy as some of the bayonets, right? Not the ones that are like an Ontario kind of K-bar type of knife, but the old school ones that were round and they were just pokey, right? So it is designed well enough as a point-driven tool. Also, it can be thrown and hit hard enough to do that work.
Yeah.
So looking at it as far as like what's the impact that I can say that our partnership has had on the landscape, on the world of throwing? Well, so far, the big accolade that I can say is the proliferation, the increased popularity of the subcompact line. And it's cool to watch that people develop that.
Yeah. And several other knife makers have kind of jumped on that as well, which is cool to see.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Especially the finger in the finger groove on the spine.
Yes.
I believe that Jason Johnson and I were the first ones to do that back in early 2020. And since then, I've seen a lot of other people do it, and it's fantastic. It's exactly what you would want on the edge of a knife. It works well.
Well, and in the Gen 2, right? Do you have a Gen 2 with you?
Not with me right now. No, not with.
So the Gen 2 are sitting at the post office here. Anyone that ordered one, they'll be shipping out tomorrow or Wednesday.
Hell yeah.
So Gen 1, right? Acid wash finish, right? Subdued lasering of the where it says danger, all that. New ones, stone wash finish, the lasering, the logos are different, and we have that fuller on the spine. Which is really cool, and we want to really push that envelope with it.
Yeah. Yeah, the first generation, we were trying to get them done as quickly as possible and keeping them as cheap as possible. So the next generation, I definitely wanted to have that finger groove. I definitely wanted that in the beginning, but it was our first design, and it works fine without it. It's just a nice added feature that sets it apart from other knives.
Yeah. And I know talking to some folks, they think it's the pajamas de la Chatte, the cat's pajamas, and some people, they're indifferent to it. And both of those opinions are valid, right? It'll never take away from the amount of control that you're going to have. When we look on the better buoy that we did for I Like Knives, when you throw it, it's like being on tracks.
Yeah.
You got one of these coming, right? So,
and it's really, I think it's most valuable for people that are new. When you're trying to figure out that finger placement, your finger can slide off from one side to the other, and having that groove in there really makes a channel for your finger to slide properly.
Absolutely. And I mean, we integrated it on the bullet train. We did a limited run of ones for Lobo on the 8mm Nomad. It's one of those things where you can get a lot of control of it, which is rad. The Dragonfly Shuriken, we wound up doing the fuller on that. This is one of the original ones. Going through and putting the fuller on the Bodashi, and really just kind of trying to integrate that. And it's like now it's a fellow out of Germany. He did a riff on the Bodashi and did a nice fuller on the spine. It was Maui? What's his handle?
Maui 80.
He sent a few out, and you know what? He just did a killer job on it. Right,
it's an extremely well-made knife because it's all machined. It's the nicest throwing knife I've ever seen as far as execution, and I haven't thrown it a whole lot yet because I don't want to fuck it up. I want to wait till it gets a little nicer out so I can go outside, so I don't have to worry about hitting the tip in the concrete or anything.
Well, and I believe he's a machinist, and German machinists in particular are very, very meticulous. So it's like you wind up having this balance between the thing is exact, right? Like it would probably be down to the fraction of a gram between the two of them. The only deviation would be probably the density of the stock, right? Like you may have deviations in the stock in the metal itself for density, and just killed it. But you wind up having something where it's like to go through and produce them in masses. Someone was talking to me, said for him, if he was to go through and actually like make them for sale with the work hours into it, would be like $200 or $300 each. They would wind up costing.
Right.
He he did a few as just like for the boys and stuff like that for you. And there's a couple other people that got them and just kind of like a, hey, I really appreciate it sort of thing.
Yeah, real quick, Matthew 1980 says, I made a knife today with jimping on the spine. It adds a nice, really good texture. And Ace, that's something you and I talk about quite a bit as well, because we wanted to have some kind of texture to the knife so we can get a better feel, or you started calling it a purchase. And I totally agree, because there are some knives out there that are just, they feel too slick. And I like to have some kind of scale on there, or I don't like them to be totally clean. I like that little bit of texture.
Well, and on the Apex, we got a mill scale that we put a slight grinding over top to just kind of control that a little bit.
I love it. Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to like this knife at all, but for me, I don't know if I just kind of got a little better at throwing no spin, but normally I don't like bulbs on the handle. Like the original Danger Dashi, the way I was throwing it, I struggled with that bulb. And
this
original works really well for me.
It's kind of a ramp, and yes, it's made for open palm throwing.
Yep.
But this, I think it's a little bit different because there's not like a transition there. It just kind of it gets wider, and I think that's why you might like it. But hey, when you were just holding up that the Apex, is that the finish that people are going to be able to buy? That right there? Okay.
Yeah, this is the mill scale finish.
This is one of the prototypes that you sent me, and it doesn't have any of that finish on there, and I prefer that. Okay, I'm glad. I forgot to ask you about that.
The ones that I sent, they went up with DHL to today. They'll be showing up, and they have that finish on them.
Good.
Yeah.
I love the look of it. I love the feel of it. It looks like a forged knife. I prefer it.
What I like about it is just the contrast, right? Like we talked about like tuxedo grinds and stuff like that, and it gives it a nice aesthetic. But kind of going through and looking at texture, you wind up seeing texture work in a few different ways. Right, so when we go through and we look at like when we're working on, Mitch had mentioned that we're kind of coming into we're the first on the scene with the instinctive race knives. I mean, speed knives are a different thing. It's a different activity. So having the race knife geared on that no spin, going through and looking at this, because it's a thinner knife, 3/16, to go through and put that type of full, it just doesn't work. So just see if we can show up, but because these are laser cut, there winds up being these micro bumps there, and they work two ways. They give you a little bit of purchase.
I love it, dude.
But it also allows it to slide.
Yep.
Right, it allows it to slide, and then kind of when we're looking at what we need to be able to do, we need to be able to grip the. I'm really happy with how the Fast Dash came out, because on this we have a micro texture here that's slightly less, and it allows you to kind of get just enough. But as soon as it gets that pressure, it just builds up and lets go.
Yep.
And then kind of streamlining that. These I just pitch them in there. I can go full Loic on it, where I just kind of have it in that sparrow's egg, and as soon as that kind of comes in, is enough pressure, just breaks and lets go. Yeah. And so for me, kind of, I'm fond of saying God is in the details, or if you're an atheist, the absence of God is in the details. There's a whole bunch of things where it's like subtle changes to designs really, really matter. And you kind of
subtle changes.
wind up.
You wouldn't
Say
think
again?
you wouldn't think that those subtle changes would make that big of a difference, but they really do. Like just this is only an 8-inch trimmer than a regular Dashi, but it's a whole different knife. Even though it's the same shape, it performs totally different.
Well, and when you go through and you look at, I got to grab a harrow.
Okay. Thanks, Jake. I'm glad you like it.
When we go through and we look at like what difference does the details make, right? So we have the 8.5, which people have gone through and said, it's really like a half arrow, right? But because this is steeper, it penetrates much deeper, right? And so winds up going through and right, we can right in that half spin, we can right. Some guys like a trigger and stuff like that. Some guys don't. So it gives that option. And when we go through and we look at, there's a knife that bowshuriken.org did, Matthias Bind, and this is the Harrow. It's the half arrow, but when we go through and we look at we've taken the shape and just shifted it over.
Right.
And so when we go through and we look at it, it's like, okay, well, it looks like it's a lot like this.
It's
but
similar for sure.
The way that, like, this doesn't work as well in no spin as this does because of how the forward pressure works. And so some guys have done right similar kind of riffs on this type of thing where you have a bulb on the end and this is here. So when we start going through and looking at how is it that the details change things. So as an example, if somebody, right, the shape of this, we talk about the balance point. So the balance point of the knife on this is, it's slightly rear heavy, right?
Slightly, yeah.
Right, so that it necks down the center, well, it's center balanced, right? But it's balanced like that. But if we go through and we shift the right, so this is a lot thinner in the center than some. So the weight being shifted to the outer points, making it so the weight distribution is more like a dumbbell or a barbell. Mm-hmm. Well, what effect does that have on how it performs? Well, it affects how fast it's able to rotate, right? And so people are like, well, I mean, that's not going to make a difference. Go to a kid's playground, if you're still allowed near one, get on the merry-go-round, right? Get on the merry-go-round, start spinning it. What happens when you go outward? Slows down. What happens when you go inward? Can speed up.
Yes, yeah.
So this at, 9 inches, 9.5 inches, I can hit 10-meter half spins with it. And I have to force it to rotate because of that weight distribution. So we start getting into what difference do these subtle changes make? A lot more than you think they do. In some cases, yeah. A massive difference. But when we go through and we look at too heavy in the rear makes it need a country mile to half spin, sure can, man. So the further that is to the further the weight is out from the center, the slower it does, right? And so to Matt's point, as this is, if we shift that back, it's rotating here versus here, right? So it all depends on what it is we want to do. This performs better in half spin than the 8.5 inches of danger or the danger dashi.
100% agree.
This is specialized for half spin. Or sorry, it's specialized for no spin.
Correct.
Right? It's set up so that you have a fair amount of fudge factor as this is coming in, that it'll still kick right in. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it doesn't take much of this bad boy, especially in cottonwood, to bury it up to the back tires, right? Like, I think you sent me some pictures where she's buried this deep in, right? So one of the things that I find neat about kind of the self-directed education that's, designing throwing stuff is the details matter. And the details matter way more than you could ever imagine, right? Going through and taking two shuriken, we have 10-millimeter shurikens that are 19 centimeters and 10-millimeter that are 22 centimeters. Well, 30 millimeters, 3 centimeters is just over an inch. It shifts the balance point in a very, very noticeable way. Mm-hmm. Right? How it is the action that you need to use and how you release and everything, it changes. It changes a lot.
Yeah.
So I find it fascinating all the small differences that can make. The 8.5 will definitely kill a coconut.
Yeah. Kill a chicken too.
Well, you threw one at a cantaloupe and stuck it into the target through the cantaloupe.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
They're wild.
I mean, it wasn't even a big deal. So real quick while I'm thinking about this. So the race knife, it's really interesting because when I first got into knife throwing, there was like all these major rules about a knife had to be a certain length and it had to be a certain weight because they were trying to get people to get away from throwing the cheap Chinese knockoff stuff that are made of stainless and are actually dangerous. So it's interesting as we've progressed over the years. Now we're going back down to a lighter knife to make it quicker. But these are definitely not made out of stainless, and they're much more safe.
That one's 1084 spring steel.
1084, yeah. They still will ricochet, and that's still a concern, but nothing like it used to be. And since at my throw at Dangerfest, we don't really follow any standardized rules, I can get away with pretty much anything. And hopefully in the future, we'll start to see other organizations and clubs start to follow suit. We'll see.
I was talking to a cat today. He's looking to go to his first throw. His name's LeBlanc, and he's killing it. He ordered a set of those, and he sunk it at like 14 meters, 46 feet or something like that. I was like, and I'm thinking to myself, the fuck you did? And then here's the video of it. And here's the thing, bud, like nice flight pass is like he's killing it.
Yeah, he's doing really well. Hey, this one guy says, can you briefly describe what a race knife is? You want to do this, or you want me to?
Well, I'll go through, give my take, and you can kind of give yours. So I would say that a race knife, the term race knife comes from actually IDPA. So IDPA is in the shooting sports, and you're going through and you're doing your pistol craft, where you're running around, hitting your obstacle course. There's all this kind of stuff. So there's two main modern action shooting sports, right? Without getting into the cowboy stuff, which is, I mean, if you want to put on a buckskin and a coon hat, I mean, do you, right? So the modern pistol craft sports, IDPA, IPSC, right? And so the biggest distinction is IPSC kind of allows open class and other shit. IDPA, that's where you see the guys, the photographer vests and stuff like that. If you ever see an old guy with a photographer's vest, he's totally got a gun on him, like 100%, right? Like if you see some guy walking around with a photographer's vest, that guy totally has a 45 on him. So where the IDPA allowed the modern stuff, and what I mean by that is you started seeing what they called race guns. And I don't have a pistol handy, but you would see flared out mag wells. You would see people holding mags on their belt with magnets. You would see light recoil springs. You'd see custom loads, right, where it's like your recoil spring would just like move the slide. Like you could actually go through and just pick up the pistol without one in the pipe and throw it back and then forward, and you'd cycle the action.
That's
right. That's where a lot of the holographic Wilson Combat makes some nice stuff, but if you want a gun that you're going to abuse, just get a Glock. You clean it with a brake cleaner and put rust check on and put it back together using, right, like if you plan to get it dirty, just get a Glock. And so you wind up seeing all the like the EOTechs, the holographic sights, the aim points. All of that tech came at IDPA. So a race gun is something that has been tuned specifically for this sport, right? The nonsense that is this sport, guys talking about always gaming it, right? Right. He has something that is not practical, and the entire point is for winning at this sport, right? And so that's really where the race knife comes in. The race knife is designed specifically to make somebody perform better and improve their odds when they are doing fast draw, no spin.
Right. And it's the same for rotational fast draw as well, which that was the way that people have done fast draw for as long as fast draw's been around. Last year at Dangerfest, we started incorporating no spin into fast draw, and it was very popular. No spin is like one of the most popular things that everybody wants to learn how to do. And I've always performed very well with my thinnest Bowies. So I thought I had a set of regular dashies that were 3/16 thick but the bulb is a little bit wider. So I thought maybe we'll shave off an 1/8 inch all the way around, 3/16 thick. And now we have a knife that's 156 grams, which is light compared to most of the stuff on the market today. But this knife is
but you should see what I do with it. Holy shit.
Yeah, the video. Yeah, the knife is it's very forgiving. And the next thing about the race knife is everybody's going to have to come up with their own style of sheath. Now, people keep asking me what kind of sheath should they buy or where should they position it. You shouldn't ask me. You should just experiment with that with yourself. You know, this is all relatively new, and what may work for me may not work for you. So I suggest building your own Kydex sheath, or build them out of cardboard and duct tape, or get an old sheath and see what works for you. And yeah, hopefully knife throwing is the future of the sport. You know, we've talked about that quite a bit, and it'll be interesting to see how it progresses over the next few years, because I'm really going to push it.
It just makes it more interesting. And I did a video today, because who should you go through and get a sheath from? Whoever you trust to your Kydex. All right. Oki does some good stuff with Kydex. Karush is doing great stuff. Yep. Kukuru, right? I think he is. I'm not sure if he's in here right now. There's guys that are doing great Kydex. But until you figure out what it is you want and where you want to carry, I literally took a pre-workout container, cut it open, right? Just because I needed plastic. That one was made out of acrylic. I can thermoform acrylic, right? So I, held it over the stove, flattened it out, and then I wrapped it around there, heated it up with the knife, pressed it together, wrapped some cardboard stuff around it, and I did that and then wrapped the stuff around so that it's not poking out the bottom. But like, this thing's in there and
perfect.
Right?
Oh, it still comes out.
It's good enough. So, I mean, you can go through and set that up where it's like, oh, do I want to go cross draw, or do I want to, right? And kind of getting into that. And once you've figured out where it is you want, apparently Jake does some nice leather. Once you know where it is you want to draw from, then we can start getting into making it, right? Like, it's kind of like that old Alice in Wonderland thing, right? If you don't know where you're going, any way you go will do, right? So this type of a rig allows you, like, literally duct tape it to an old belt and just play with yourself, right? Your cross draw position, like if you're, let's see if I can get this to work, not have it fall over, right? So if you're, like a wave style thrower and you're throwing bladed, cross draw is going to make the most sense for you, right?
Correct.
Right, so you're there, you're coming into your position, you're throwing over, right? If you're, right, like if you're in there and you want that kind of standard strong side back, boom, and then you're going to do whatever it is you do. But we need to be able to kind of figure out what it is you want. And I would say with no spin more than rotational. With that said, the caveat, rotational is not my strong suit. Your grip matters way more. Right. I mean, if you're not getting a consistent grip on that knife, I mean, if you pitch it 1,000 times, it's going to go in eventually, but that's not going to win you anything.
No, you need to be very consistent.
Yeah. So going through and just rigging up this hood rat type of sheath, like, you can experiment with where it is you want to use that. And the biggest thing is, just make sure, because especially this one, because it's so pointy, make sure you have your plastic liner in there so that you don't just push it through. Protein powder containers, pre-workout containers, pop bottles, right? You go through, cut it, use that plastic, heat it up, thermoform it around, and take some cardboard. And I took some stretch wrap.
Okay. Took
some of that, put the cardboard there, and that's just keep the tension. And then I use Gorilla Tape, and it's good enough for getting you started.
Yeah.
And I want to point that out because I think that the most important thing with any activity is just start. Just start doing it.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I tell people about throwing knives too. Just make your own design. See what fucking works. If you can't afford a custom throwing knife, just make your own. Who cares? They don't have to be out of the best steel. It's a throwing knife.
Go to Walmart, pick up some butter knives, and put some points on them.
Or a
I mean,
pry bar.
that's
Cut a
sure.
45 degree, whatever.
Yep.
So real quick, Zach Rebier, he 3D printed some sheaths, and he got 3rd place at Dangerfest this year. And he makes some
Nice.
cool shit. He makes, and 3D printing is the future. That's really cool.
Additive manufacturing is really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this guy says, how old or young is this version of throwing with these style of knives? So this is all brand new. Ace and I kind of, we've been talking for the past couple of years, and we've been trying to figure out how to get more people involved. Of course, you see that there's knife and axe throwing on ESPN, and it's huge. It is huge, but it's really boring. It's not fun to watch. It's not even the knife throwing that we do, standing on the line and throwing. It's only interesting if you're really into knife throwing, but everybody likes to watch fast draw. It's interesting, it's exciting, it's fast. So we are trying to be on the forefront here and get more people involved and, make this my living.
Well, and last year in the fall, right, after Dangerfest 2021, I came out and saw you. And I said, okay, how do we, right, like, do you want to make this, the conversation is, do you want to make this a big sport? And the answer obviously was yes. And I said, okay, quite frankly, watching people stand on the line and throw knives, like I throw knives and I'm not going to bother, right? Like I don't care. I have no interest, and I throw knives. And so the conversation became, how do we go through and turn this into a sport or an activity that somebody that doesn't even throw would stop flipping the channel, that would see the video on Instagram and stop and watch the last part.
Yep.
And there was 3 components to the answer. Trick shots, right? And we're seeing, right, trick shots are already leading the way on that, where there's, and now like there was a time where tossing up a can and pinning it, people are like, and literally Matt Todd is doing it, 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
right.
big...
Nolan Beckham is taking a knife in reverse grip and throwing it and making it do a full rotation and doing it.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and it's just like, that's become, the insane has become the mundane. Right. So we're really seeing the trick shot stuff, but people want to watch it. And if you're the uninitiated, like, wow. Right. It's wild. Right, tossing up a big lighter and like sticking that with a sparkler going in the background to get the fireball. Like there's some wild stuff, and it's interesting for people to watch, right? Like,
yes.
And there's some of them like that card, that thing that tossed at the card. Here's the thing, not that impressive to watch, but like, is it ever fucking hard to do?
It's really hard.
Right? Like you're sitting there like, right, and try doing it from fast draw, right? And so we go through and we see trick shots. People want to see that, whether it's, balloons filled with oxyacetylene and, right, there's a whole bunch of shit you can do. Rad. Then we start, right, and it's like the next component, instinctive, right? Like there's always that conversation of, is this a valid form of self-defense? Is it a valid option as a martial art? Well, we come back to the whole topic of IDPA, IPSC, the gun games. Let's go through and turn that into something in which it's action-packed, right? Like someone's going through this course, some like, shootouts or whatever, and you could have reactive targets, whatever. Even if it's just the basic silhouettes, you got to go through and do this. And whether it's a scored activity or not, I mean, at a certain point, the rules need to be codified, but going through and just having that being someone that gets to do it, right? That's like when people talk about your throw, right? How was Dangerfest 2022? That's one of the big things that they mentioned. Like it was wild. Getting to go and do that was wild, right?
The instinctive course was very popular this year, and you're right. It's trick shots, it's fast draw, and it's the instinctive stuff. And we'll always include the traditional no spin and regular rotational stuff, but I'm always trying to make it more exciting and have more things going on, because as we grow every year, I just need to keep people's attention and have something for them to do off to the side or whatever. So,
well, absolutely. And then, I mean, the third, which you already talked about, was fast draw. And so you go through and you look at, well, what does that mean, right? Well, I mean, we've all seen that. We've all seen the Magnificent Seven. Wow, right? You go through and you look at if you folks in the chat haven't heard of him, go and Google Bob Munden.
oh,
Bob
man.
Munden was the fastest gun to ever live.
Yeah.
Fastest gun to ever live. Stanley's Superhumans went through and did a special on him. The guy pops 2 balloons 6 feet apart at, was he 12 feet? He's not right next to him. Right? He pops 2 balloons that are 6 feet apart. He's back, and he does it in a tenth of a second. And I mean, the second shot broke at a tenth of a second. It sounds like one bang. So if you go through and you look at that guy's wrists, and he's like, his hand is just so thick because you have something, that gun probably weighs, pound and a half,
Right.
but just at it, right? And he's coming out, he's coming in, he's cocking as he's indexing, shooting, and the second one comes through. He does that in 2 shots in a tenth of a second. That is faster. Let this sink in. That is faster than you can go through and shoot in full auto. Those 2 shots. Cyclical rate of fire.
It's faster than the
Cyclical rate of fire, full auto, on a standard, M16 type of pattern is about 300 rounds a minute.
Yeah.
In full auto, right? That is, quick math, 5 rounds a second roughly. So
That's crazy.
that means that your shots are 0.2 seconds apart. He was faster than that. And he did it with a single 6. So when you go through and you watch that, I don't do fast draw pistol work. But I tell you what, I went out and I bought a single 6 just when I saw that. Just I got some wax bullets, I got some, so you can, for 45 long Colt, you can buy nickel cases where you can load a shotgun shell primer in there and a wax bullet. And I tried it. I kind of messed around to wow. And so I think fast draw is one of those things where you can be wowed by it whether you do it or not. It's
Correct.
exciting whether you do it or not, right? It's exciting to watch it. You go through and you look at the instinctive course. You don't even need to be good at it. And your heart's pumping.
Oh,
Your heart's pumping.
Yep.
Right? And so how do we go through and make that interesting? And then you go through and have this thing where it's like, it's really just you against yourself, but you're like watching it, right? So how can we go through and up that? Well, I mean, if we go through and get some with a GoPro and like a harness, and then they, send people away with a video, right? There's all sorts of stuff, right? But there's an old adage, and it goes, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. Well, there's a reason that competitive knife throwing and axe throwing was boring, that no one cared. And it's because it was this constant thing where it's like, you got to get your buckskin, you got to get your coon hat, you got to, right? Like your knife has to fit the, right? Where I think that your throw, I think Dangerfest, because it's more welcoming to new people. If it's my first throw and I'm showing up and I got to go through deal with a bunch of bureaucratic bullshit, it'll be my last throw. I don't care. I'm not going to do it, right?
We're trying to get people involved, not push them away.
Well, and I mean, you've made the point before. If there's a way for you to do it safely, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Right? If I showed up there and wanted to, I'm going to throw on the line with my gunslinger no spin. Okay, cool. Logistically, we need to, right? Okay, well, we got to make sure if you can have ricochets, we'll just position you here, right? Or if I want to go through and, throw that sidearm type of throw. Okay, well, if that was to go bad, here's where that would look. Okay, well, right, we have a kind of a weird number. You're going to be one of the last ones to go because there's going to be not a full line, right? There's ways that, and you make that effort. And I think that's what really separates your throw and why it's brought a lot more people in. It's also why it's the biggest throw, right?
Could be.
It's Anyone I've talked about 2022 was just, can you do it without shoes? Bro, you can do it all without shoes. I would like you to know that I'm doing this interview without shoes.
Yeah, I I would rather you wear shoes. And actually, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially because no spin is much more dangerous, in my opinion, because of ricochets. I was just talking with a couple of my friends that were over here over the weekend, and no one's been hurt at a throw yet, and I don't want anybody to be hurt. So I think I'm going to provide or ask people to bring safety glasses. I don't think that's happening much this year, because I've seen some really bad ricochets with no spin, and myself included. I mean, no spin, they're off axis, and I think I'm gonna require safety glasses this year. And I don't, like I said, I don't think that's too much to ask. But yeah, dude, if you want to show up and throw without shoes, fuck it, I don't care, man. I'll let
Well,
it fly.
and Ken, I mean, the reality of it is most good sunglasses are also safety glasses. So
Yeah.
And then I guess we can talk about.
He killed me. Hold on, he's saying what? No glasses? He about fucking threw a knife on my fucking head the last throw we were at.
In fairness, you were wearing glasses.
I was wearing glasses. Right.
I've seen that video.
God, dude, that was crazy.
I think that definitely for the fast draw, that like 100%, like, because your fast draw, like what's your shortest distance? 2 meters, 3 meters? I don't even think that doing fast draw 2 meters is a good idea. It's probably a terrible idea.
We used to do it at 3 meters and 5 meters, but 5 meters is like, it's like a pro level. It's not easy at all. So it didn't really catch on. So we're sticking with 10 feet or 3 meters from now on. Yeah.
So I have a little bit of controversial opinion. I think that fast draw and instinctive, I think that the standard needs to stick in a plywood. If we're going through and making the argument that this is a self-defense thing, and like we're simulating something like that, and the reason I say that is if you're not hitting with sufficient force to stick into a piece of plywood, doesn't need to go through. If you're not sticking clean enough or if you're not hitting clean enough to stick in a plywood, I think that it's questionable.
I hear you, and I'm on board, but you need to come to a throw first before.
But I don't want to.
Well,
it's also way harder.
Make those fucking decisions then, all right? I'm just saying, like, we're trying to be inclusive, dude. I have 112 throwers that come to our throw.
Mm-hmm.
And, sticking the knife, if you don't stick it, you can be as fast as fuck. If you don't stick the knife, you don't advance. So sticking into plywood on top of that, we're trying to be all inclusive, man.
Maybe like the pro level.
Yes. Okay. I agree with that 100%. But 80% of everybody that comes to Danger Fest is amateur, and we want to keep people. Yeah, we want to keep people coming back every year. So we don't want to make things too hard. That's why I did away with the 5 meter fast draw, because I kept winning.
Well, I mean, if you're going through and just throwing an event to, as a masturbatory treat to yourself.
I'm not.
Where, yeah, I mean, maybe you could wind up having like a big boy rules one. Definitely, one of the caveats that I would say is if the target became plywood, the only way you could do is no spin. Because I don't think that with full rotation, you'd be able to stick in a plywood.
You're wrong.
I want to be proven wrong.
I'll blow the fucking back out of that plywood. You don't know. You don't understand.
Well, you're talking about blowing the back out of things, and it's not even 10. Here we are. I think that the plywood would definitely it would definitely favor no spin.
You know what? I'm having a smaller throw at my house here in July. Maybe I will test that theory. Maybe we'll test it.
I'd like to see it.
Okay.
Right. And the only reason I say that is just because if you like plywood is just much harder. And so to cleave into it, unless like possibly if we're looking at full rotational knives, that would be different. But with something small like that, I think you'd struggle with a full rotation to cleave into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for rotation, I'm not throwing one of these.
No.
Ever.
No.
I'm throwing a big fucking Bowie, a 13.5-inch, 14-inch Bowie. It has a lot more mass as well.
It definitely will. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's kind of become my passion over the last little bit has been shuriken.
Yeah.
And in the last little while, last 6 months, 8 months, I have thrown a lot less knives, and I've thrown a lot more shuriken. And shuriken, in a lot of ways.
Hold on a second. Keep talking about that. I'm gonna go use the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back.
Sure. So shuriken is really kind of has become one of my loves, and kind of bringing it right back to the ninjutsu roots and stuff like that. And I've really kind of fallen in love with it. I got to be connected with a guy named Mateus Bin from bowshuriken.org. We wound up carrying his stuff. And initially, I thought that, I mean, it's just spikes. And so how complicated can it be? It's just a spike. And I would almost suggest that in some ways that there is more variation within shuriken design, or at least the same amount. We 100% do sell them. I would say that there's probably more variation, or at least an equal amount of variation in shuriken design than there is with knives. And so, just like as an example, it's hard to go the distance with them. I'll wait till Danger gets back to go through different design variations. To go the distance with them, if you want to take your shuriken game to the next level, I really recommend checking the Tsunami method. The Tsunami method is a non-traditional way, and it's really efficient. You'll be sticking well within, a few days, and there's a progression that allows you to get kind of way out there. So I was just talking about how it's my opinion that there is as much or potentially more variation within shuriken design as there is in knife design.
Yeah, there might be, for sure.
And so the reason I say that is we have everything from, your standard cubic, right? This is actually a variation of one of Suzuki's designs, right? So it's a needle point square stock. This one happens to be made out of tungsten, in which we're gonna stop selling them because the square ones break too easily. And considering, really? Yeah, because if it hits on the flat, it just tends to break, where the round ones last longer. The unfortunate part about the tungsten ones is I did them for me. They go out at more or less my cost. If you look at what the cost of like tungsten electrodes is, very, very high. But they break, and even though I put a warning on my site, I'm like, this is gonna break eventually. It's my cool, reputation I'm the customer service guy, right? Like I can't, wow, this broke on me in like a couple of days. It's like, it's not my fault, but it's also not your fault. So the debate is, like, the cubic ones are going away. The round ones, we'll kind of see how they go. But so you go through and you look at this design. Just going through and changing it to tungsten makes it completely different. You look at the Chishin Ryu ones, in which it's square and then tapered. The Chishin Ryu are really nice to start with, right? They throw really well. They're back heavy. They're great. You go through and you look at, right, something like this. This is 135 millimeters, 8-sided Nagishiru. This one's called a Stinger. It's a prototype. And it requires a completely different feel to throw than that Chishin Ryu.
Well, the Dragonfly is night. I mean, it's
Oh, man.
completely. That's a whole.
Yeah, so you go through and you look at, that Dragonfly, right? So it is tapered on 4 sides with a fuller. It's got the Dashi style point. And there's a thrower that I really, really look up to. Way better thrower than I am. But there's a knack to throwing this. And if you don't know how to hold it,
Yeah.
good luck, right? It's going to be all over the place.
Yep.
If you do know how to hold it and you can throw it, like this is, 115 grams, and I can show you a video where at 10 meters I stuck it into plywood at 10 meters, right? So it's like it'll do some wild stuff, but it's a different skill set, right? And you wind up getting into like we say shuriken, but there's within the Chinese martial arts, they have the Fei Biao, right, which is their equivalent of shuriken. So you wind up with all sorts of wild stuff. But I would say that if you can throw a knife, you can throw a knife, and there's subtle variations. But this item at that length, and this item at this length, and we get to the Iga darts right from Iga Tengu. Even the spade, the leaf, right, would be classed as a type of shuriken, kind of our take on a kunai.
Yeah.
Throwing those it's all a different feeling. And so when you go through and start getting into, like, there's a lot of variation. This is the Hornet. There's a lot of variation where, so it's like, if you can throw one knife, you can kind of throw all knives. But I think that with shuriken, with the variations, that I don't want to say it's a higher art because that sounds pretentious and stupid. It's just different.
Grip too.
Pardon me?
It's a much different grip for each one of those.
It's completely different.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like you go through and you look at this one's the Rocket, right? This is a Negishi Ryu. It's right, vortex stabilized, right? Which whistles when you throw it, right? Especially when you half spin it. But the way that you grip this and the way that you use it is different, and they all have kind of this different purpose. This, that tea knife, which has that type of point, is taken from a traditional Chinese knife. It has, it's got like a dashi style point, except it goes diagonally.
Wow, yeah.
So it has a completely different feel to it than the Chishin Ryu or the cubic spike does. And you're like, well, why though? Because it does, right? And so it just winds up being this different feeling, right? Like, I mean, people could argue that the 8.5 is a shuriken variant, right? Just because of that size. And so I would say that there are, right, people out like so with the tsunami method, like, well, is this the way to throw shuriken? There is no the way, because you wind up seeing, like, this is a Katori Shinto Ryu, right? Which version, right? Katori Shinto Ryu is a sword. This is popular in Tagake-ryu, which is a Bujinkan school, right? And like before you get into the specialty stuff, this is the Cadillac. It's got a long taper. It's got a boat tail there. This one's 10 millimeters. And so some schools will hold it flat, right? Some schools will hold it so that the corners are here and it has like a trough. But this boat tail and this taper, that's there so that when you throw, you can follow through more without putting too much backspin on it. Right, so your techniques wind up changing. You go through and you look at some of the Negishi Ryu stuff, like when you start getting into the torpedo and the stinger, they'll throw them, and they're almost using like a Buddha palm type of movement, right? The tsunami method is, right, use this crack of a whip, right? You're whipping it in there, and it shoots this way. Where the traditional Japanese methods, they typically will loft in.
Yeah.
Right. When you get into and like the traditional Negishi Ryu, where this comes from, they would take this and they would actually wrap it with like a jute cord and create a little bit of fletching. which, here's the thing, heavy Chinese influence, right?
Right.
Like, what a lot of people don't talk about with ninjutsu is it's heavily Chinese influence. There's documentation in scrolls going back, 2,000 years before Christ, talking about the use of ninja type of operatives, of stealth operatives, right? And so going through and having this cordage wrapped there, so it kind of looks like, something you'd use for a tranquilizer gun. Well, how this changes the drag and all these things, it all matters, but it's also how you grip it changes, right? When you go through and are you creating that drag on there, right? Is this lofting in? Is this one of those things where it's just a pop and it's going through? Typically, the Japanese styles, they tend to use a rigid wrist instead of a loose one, and a rigid arm, and it's a very type of movement. Sometimes it's here, right? Right. The MSR, they're very much here. I posted a video on the Learn the Art of Throwing channel of Oki throwing. Oki's throw that he's doing there is very characteristic of the MSR pitching style, right? Because you talk about there's pushers and there's pitchers, and he's and laces it in there, right? And about he posted a video today, I think, of him doing the same throw, 6 meters, killing it. Where the tsunami method, because I'm a wave thrower, right? That's what I like. And the dick of the way I throw is not bigger than the dick of the way that you throw. I just like wave throws. It just makes sense for me. I'm really long and lanky. It works, right? So the fact that I have this loose wrist, loose arm, and pop and throw that through, that works really well for certain types of objects. Works really well.
So you are a SCANF student, correct?
Yes.
So would you say that the tsunami method is just your interpretation of what works for you?
So I was chatting with Pete the other day about this. I think SCANF is not a technique. I think SCANF is a collection of principles. And if I were to go through and show the tsunami method videos to Misha, and tried to tell him it was SCANF, he would yell at me and tell me I'm an idiot and I'm fucking wrong. Because it's not SCANF. There's commonality, right? There's consistency across category. It is a wave style of method. The reason it's called tsunami is wave, right? Why is it why is it I call it tsunami method? I didn't say, this is the way to throw shuriken, because there's a bunch of ways. But I'm showing the way that I throw it and the way that I work for me, because I don't want to get into this, right? Who's doing it right. I'm not saying it's SCANF because there's some characteristics, but there's some things that are different. SCANF isn't about throwing shuriken anyway. And so going through and saying, oh, well, this is the way to throw shuriken, I'm going to wind up with a whole bunch of people talking, well, that's not the way you throw shuriken. Right. You know how many shuriken schools there are?
A lot.
At least 100.
A lot.
At least 100.
And then all
it's like
all the Japanese schools are very strict, and there's only one way to do shit. And that's I respect Japanese martial arts so much, but I don't like that about that. Like, just do what works best for you.
So I have an extensive martial arts background. I fight and grapple with people all the time. I'm one of the few people that there's a period of time on a regular basis I put my hands on people and use the skill sets. And it's the biggest reason that I am so principles based, because as an example, so I approach everything as, what's the goal? What's the objective? Okay, we have a knife and I need to stick into that target.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's do that. So if you and I are both able to do that consistently, is my way better than yours?
I guess
we're both accomplishing the same goal, right? What's that?
I guess that's on how consistent you are and how accurate you are. But that comes down to the skill too, right?
Well, and exactly, right? So like, if we're both able to do that, and you've been doing what you're doing for 3 years and I've been doing it for 6 months, and we're both achieving the same result at that point, but we go back to 5 meters and I'm struggling a little bit, I probably just need practice, right? So what I'm trying to go through and do, my goal is to go through and make the knife travel like this, or the shuriken travel like this. And I want to be able to do it accurately, I want to be able to do it consistently, and if I'm able to do that, that's great. There winds up being this kind of, you know, back and forth about, oh, what's better? What's better for who, right? Like, what's the goal, right? If you want to be able to throw on a weekend, right? I would go through and I would learn an American style, a Western style push method. If I teach somebody no spin, I'm going to start them out teaching them to push the knife. It's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to start them out with, I want you to figure out how to control it, because I don't think that they're different. I think that wave styles are a progression that you eventually get to if you keep trying to push that envelope, right? So if you go through and you look at, right, okay, I'm pushing, I'm controlling, this is going through. And as I get a little bit further back, as I'm coming down, I'm pushing up here, right? And then as I get a little bit further back, right, this is here, and I get into like this shuriken or oriental type of slide movement, right? But we could say, like, I'm still kind of pushing down on that.
Sure.
And then, like, okay, well, I'm having some problems with that, so then I start kind of being here, and I'm doing that, and I kind of brush it down. And then we get to here, and we're, right? And I think that it's just a progression. And if you keep trying to push your throw, then eventually you'll wind up with, you're cutting through the center, you're having that follow through, and eventually people that have been throwing for a while wind up with some type of a more efficient wave type of a throw, right? If you're studying your craft, if you're working it, you're trying to refine it, you're eventually going to wind up with something that looks more like a wave throw than this very awkward person throwing the ball for the first time, right? Now, it depends whether someone wants to continue trying to refine their mechanics or not, or they're, you know, they want to start moving to trick shots or whatever. But if you're sticking at 5 meters and you're able to do everything you want, you're placing, that's awesome.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
That's really good. I went out and visited Sharpshooter Knives, Marcel, who is one of the absolute biggest opponents of wave styles and scam. He had all, and so, like, when I started chatting with him, I was like, send me the memes, right? And he's like, what? I'm like, Danger said, I'm like, I'm a scamp guy. I'm like, Danger says you got all kinds of funny memes. He's like, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not a thin-skinned pussy. Like if I can't laugh at myself, I'm going to laugh at anyone else.
Yeah.
And I mean, Canadians, especially blue-collar ones like him and I are, we're ball-busting characters, right? That's our culture.
Yeah.
Right. If I haven't made fun of your nose, or, you know, you're too short, right? Question your sexuality, whatever the issue is, right? I had a buddy he was 230 pounds and had thyroid cancer when he was young. So he was 230 pounds jacked and had a 15-inch neck. And you better believe that every few days I've said something about his neck to him, because that's what we did. Right.
Yeah.
So I went out and visited him, and I said, I think that there's, yeah, man, but you have a woman that loves you. It's fine, right? Like, she puts up with it, so you're not too fat. It's fine, right? So I went out and visited Marcel because I had some time off in the summer, and I was like, nobody really kind of understands scamp until they've seen it, until they've been taught. I said, let's just hang out and throw.
Yeah.
And he's like, and I said, I'm not going to go through and try to tell you I'm a better thrower than you are. I said, Marcel was a great thrower.
He is
great.
He is
right?
really good.
And, like, compete in some online competitions. I mean, like, at one time was regularly doing better than 200, right? So, I mean, he's objectively a better thrower than I am. I said, I'm just going to show you that this works. I'm going to show you it's not bullshit. I'm going to show you it's not tricks. I said, there might even be a few things that you find interesting you want to integrate. So I spent, 2 or 3 days with him, took the dog on a road trip. It was great. And one of the things that I showed him was cutting through the center. And then I also showed him and got him able to, 3-4 meters, able to do a wave style throw that traveled like a dart.
Oh, yeah.
Got it on slow motion. You're doing this. Here's how this is working. I'm like, you don't have to keep doing it. I'm not going to tell you it's a better way to throw. It's definitely not going to be better for you today than what you've been doing for 3 years.
Sure.
But there's things about this that you may like and you may want to integrate. Called me about a week after I was out there and said, I'll never throw the same again. He said, my throws are different and they'll never be the same because I've integrated some of those concepts, right? And my goal was not to change his mind or to change how he threw. It was just to show him that there's something of value here.
Of course, yeah.
And Scamp, for whatever reason, more than any other thing in the knife throwing world, has a reputation of being kind of culty and standoffish. Like, no, bro, you just don't understand this sophistication. Stop it.
It is. It is.
Stop.
Yeah.
Right? You're watching poorly dubbed videos of Fedden that were shot on a potato in like 2008. You can't even see what's going on. The lighting's low. He's going through, I have the Scamp book, and it's a dissertation where they're talking about, going through compounding the angular velocity and converting to linear velocity and creating an impulse wave and bouncing off your go-gill tendon reflex. And I'm just like, sure. And I have an engineering background, and I'm a giant nerd, and I know what all of that means. But I also don't need to explain it to you that way. I don't need to explain it to you in a way that I'm trying to make myself sound smarter than I am, because this is the thing that I have, right? This is my claim to fame. I'm going to name this thing after me. This is my namesake. This is my legacy. So when you go through and you look at that, I don't need to do that. My goal as somebody that, I've coached people and been paid a lot of money to coach people in different things. My goal is not to convince you that I know more than you do, right? My goal is to get you to do this thing that you're trying to learn to do fast. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't need to go through and create a control drama. I don't need you to think that I'm better than you, that I'm smarter than you. And me going through and using a bunch of $20 words that you're going to have to ask me to explain, or you're going to be too embarrassed to ask what they mean, is not communicating. It's stupid, right? You need to discuss it with your audience. When you're talking about something as primal as knife throwing, why are we going through and trying to turn it into something it's not?
Yeah.
It takes away from it.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't bring us close together.
Yeah.
What's that?
We're throwing shit. Hey, address this question here.
Sure.
So he says, so it's not bad to train wrong when starting out. Well, there are bad habits that you want to stay away from, but it's when you're starting out, it's just all about experimentation. That's how I learned. I'm all self-taught. I would see someone do something on YouTube or Facebook, and then I would go in the backyard and I would try it over and over and over until I thought that I could figure it out myself. Was I doing that exact thing? Probably not, but I'm sticking the knife and I'm getting good results.
You also come from a BMX background, so like reading Thrasher magazine and watching like those videos and stuff like that. There was no instructions, right? You're just like, no. Okay, I'm gonna go down the stairs and pull up, and I'm gonna spin my handlebars around and hope, and I'm gonna put a mouth guard in first, right? So a lot of it's culture, right? Like right? You coming from a BMX skateboard culture, it's kind of like you see it and you try it until you can do it.
Yeah.
Right? Is that like what's wrong? Are you enjoying what you're doing? If the answer is yes, I don't think you're wrong. What's the fastest way to develop proficiency with any level, with any type of skill? If you can find somebody to show you the ropes, to give you the basics. Now that may be an instructional work, and there's some out there, right? You may like what Adam Cheladine has some. I got this. If someone wants to get going on Shuriken, right? Like Tsunami Method will be a good place to start. There is, right, like you can go through and get coached by a Russian and get yelled at for a year, right? You can go through and maybe you happen to live 40 minutes from danger and you just get to go get drunk with them on Saturdays and throw knives, right? If you have some, but really, like who is the guy who that's basically what he did and then killed it and then kind of stopped throwing? You tell me about him.
My buddy Taylor, I taught him how to throw, and 6 weeks later, he is a world champion and was putting up master scores.
Right. So going through and getting coaching, whether it's in boxing and judo and knife throwing or anything, will greatly increase the rate at which you reach your peak. And depending on how good you are at naturally figuring things out, getting proper coaching could wind up having you at a higher level than you ever could have imagined. Right. So you look at Lobo. Lobo could already throw knives. In just over a year of working with Uncle Stan, he went through and won a world championship.
Yep.
Right. In a year and a half, he's taught like. Sorry, it was in like it. Yeah, he was tossing up rings or 1 inch and pin them, tossing up right. Like so, going through and getting coaching. I mean,
fundamentals are key.
Well, and knowing what not to do, right? Like saving yourself all the time that it takes to build that skill set and figure it out. And I mean, it's like, oh well, it's just throwing a knife. Well, throwing a ball is right like a pitch. There's coaches that get paid a lot of money to teach people how to pitch baseball, right? So it's like a ball is a simpler object, but what's the difference between somebody that's even at a varsity level and somebody not? Well, even a varsity level pitcher has had coaching in how to pitch. Sure. They've learned that skill. And so, it all depends on what you want to do. If you just want to fuck around in your backyard, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to go through and reach an exceptional level of ability with Tatami Shigiri or right throwing or whatever, you can reach a reasonable level being self-taught. Yep. If you can go through and get some instruction, and that could even just be DVDs where, like the old Thorne method ones, right? Like you look at what Ralph Thorne was doing in the early 2000s. I mean, it's probably before that.
He's a pioneer.
Killing it.
Yeah.
Right, killing it. I mean, he's got an amazing shirt and leather pants and a vest and stuff like that. And it's like, but like, here's the thing. He could throw like no one else at that time, right? Like we can go through and look at, by today's standard, he's still pretty damn good. Yeah. Then understand the level of throwing.
Yeah.
No one's doing it.
Yeah.
And so if you want to get good at something, there's nothing wrong with getting coaching. There's nothing wrong, trying to get instruction, right? Could be DVDs. Who is the other? There's the blackjack method for knife throwing, one of the older ones. As far as videos.
I've been searching recently.
Sure.
There's a lot more knife books out there than I realized. There's like self-defense knife throwing books, like people that I'd never even heard of. I've been searching stuff online lately, and I need to buy these books because they're by people that I've never heard of. And yeah, well, Jason Johnson is another pioneer as well, which he didn't jump onto the scene until 2014. It was the first time I ever saw him post a video on Instagram. But sure. Jason's been throwing since the mid 90s or early 90s probably.
Oh, easily, yeah. So like you go through and you look at it. There's nothing wrong with practicing something wrong if you're having fun. Right. I highly suggest at least getting a video, getting some books, trying to get someone to give you the basic idea of what it is you need to do so you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. It'll save yourself a lot of time. If you're just starting out, go to a throw. Right. There's going to be tons of people that love to talk and love to share information, and just like look around until you see someone that you really kind of like the way they throw, and just be like, hey man, like, can you help me out? Because everyone's really welcoming. And that's legit too.
It's right? Huge. Yeah. Glad you mentioned that, because if you want to learn quick, go to a throw, because everybody's really forthcoming with all their information, willing to teach, and you will learn more in a single weekend than you probably could in months and months on your own, learning on your own. And, knife throwing, you can take it can keep it as a hobby, do it in your backyard by yourself, or you can take it as far as Adam Cheladine has and traveled all around the world and hit multiple champions. The other suggestion I would do is join some knife throwing groups on Facebook, or start making videos here on Instagram or YouTube. The knife throwing community is second to none, in my opinion, and everybody's willing to help. There's not a whole lot of egos out there. And yeah, just get involved if you want to learn more, ask questions.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you go through, look at Adam Cheladine, you look at Jason Johnson. Lauren's got something really cool coming up, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like they're. What's that?
Loic has some pretty good instructional videos. He's an incredible thrower as well. We kind of forgot to mention him. There's a lot of good stuff out there, people.
Yeah, Lobo's got one of the fastest growing presences. I was actually contacted this morning because A Few Good Knives, one of his videos, I'm on there as like a collaborator, and they were asking if they could, get the rights to the video and like use it, and they're going to pay a percentage and stuff like that. I was like, so like I threw out some names. I was like, well, you got to talk to Full Tank Clan. You got to talk to this guy, right? You got to talk to Lobo. You got to like here's a whole bunch of people that are doing cool trick shots. That's going to be way more up your alley. But it's neat, right? And I mean, the interest in it is growing and growing and growing. And I think that I think it's something that's very, very primal, and it's very much in our DNA. You go through and you look at throwing an object has been used for, hunting, whether you're knocking a squirrel out of a tree, right? Picking up a rock and, throwing it at a dog or a coyote so it'll go away when you're herding your sheep, right? Like, we've been throwing things for a really, really long time, right? Mm-hmm. I would say that it's possible that the first kind of weapon used in hunting was probably a rock that was thrown and not a spear.
Probably, yeah.
Right? And just going through and looking at the simplicity of it, so it's very much in our DNA, and it's cool to see this kind of resurgence of that. Are we the first to kind of going through and talking about, is throwing a knife, is that a valid self-defense thing? Well, when we go through and we look at it, it's like the idea of it is very, very old, right? So we're going through, right? You always see that, I'd never throw my knife, or I'd never do this. It's like, okay, well, here's the thing. I wouldn't shoot like if I had one bullet left in my gun and I didn't know how to shoot, I probably wouldn't try taking that headshot either, right? So it's like, what's the level of development of the skill that you have? But also, what's your confidence in the skill, right? So like, I'd never do that. Well, why should I hold myself the standard that this person does? Because we know that throwing weapons have been used and have a long-standing history of being used under duress, right? There's a reason that the samurai carried them, mm-hmm. right? In feudal China, you look like the different dynasties. The reason that in China there is these like ways in which you greet people, right? Whether it's bowing as formality, is you didn't just sneak up on anyone, because they were, right? You go talk to like an old Chinese grandma, right? They're armed. They always have a knife or some type of pokey on them, always.
Yeah. And
so you go and you start looking at, you wouldn't just walk up to a woman, because at that time, they would always have a hairpin or something on them, and a lot of times they were poisoned.
Oh,
right?
Shit.
And so when we start going through and looking at, the 8.5 inches of danger, the 8.5 inches of danger was designed to deliver, because the conversation is always, that's it, right? Like, that happens, and it's over. And people will espouse this level of expertise in what lethality is, right? So, one guy was telling me about how guy was telling me about how somebody else had told him, Mateus was being told by somebody who claimed to have this expertise that, oh, I mean, like, the needle style of shuriken, they're the most lethal. They're the most lethal. And I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah. So, and Mateus, like, I mean, he's the expert. I was like, okay, let's go through and dissect this, because I don't want to just tell you it's horseshit. I want you to understand. I said, firstly, that person that claims expert status, how many people have they killed with this shuriken that they are saying is so lethal?
Yeah, let's hear.
How many times have they done that in their life? And they're like, well, I don't know. I said, could we say probably not at all? Because he lives in a Western country, right? He lives in a Western country. He's a white dude. The reality of it is probably not. Okay. Does anyone that he knows, have they killed somebody with this very lethal needle-shaped shuriken? He's like,
yeah.
I said, realistically, probably not. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about the lethality of something, we need to discuss, and it doesn't matter what the object, like what the object of the weapon is, right? When we start talking about the mechanism of action for lethality. So a shuriken that weighs 50 or 60 grams hitting somebody in the forehead is, or really anywhere, right? Because if it's needle-shaped, it's round. Even hitting me in the neck, it's not going to create a large enough wound channel for me to bleed.
Right.
Me going through and getting poked in the windpipe with something the size of a pencil is not lethal. It's just not. Right? It's uncomfortable. It may dissuade me, but it's not lethal. What's that?
More of a distraction most of the time back in the day.
Right? Even it going through and hitting me in the eyeball, it's not going to be lethal. I won't have my eye anymore, but it's not going to be lethal. So what's the mechanism of action? So if we go through and we look at something like this, there is a mechanical force. There's a mechanical mechanism of action for injury. That hitting a coconut, we know it's going to punch through. Mm-hmm. Right? It going through and hitting me in the breastplate, it's going to break that. Right? So there is enough mass there for it to mechanically break. It's going to, there's enough energy there that, right, the geometry is such that it's going to be able to cause an injury. And the reality of it is, I mean, it's likely to go through and be able to punch through a forehead. Right? Dropping in the snot box is going to substantially change the course of that person's thinking. Right?
It'll ruin your day.
It'll definitely ruin your day. Right? So when we go through and we start looking at what is the lethality of this or that, we need to go through and say, okay, well, what's the mechanism of action? A 50-gram shuriken, a 100-gram shuriken is not going to hit hard enough to fracture the skull.
No. Right?
So when we start going through and looking at even a 100-gram shuriken in the snot box, right, there isn't, the probability of death is very, very small. And what we need to understand is when we start talking about things like shuriken, unless it weighs enough, right? I would say minimum would probably be 150 grams in order for it to be able to do that. The fast dashi has a geometry in which it will slice and pierce and penetrate. So, yes, absolutely. So it'll create a large wound channel, and especially if it has a live edge on it. But shuriken don't. And so if we're going through and looking at the mechanism of action, we either need to sever vascular tissue or nerve tissue so that it will bleed. Something that's needle-shaped is likely to just move it. It's not going to go through and create a large enough wound channel for them to bleed out. So what is the mechanism of action if it's not mechanical? When we go through and we look at historically with shuriken, poisons were heavily used. Right? The shuriken, especially in those 50-gram marks, you take a gold scorpion or a black widow or a blowfish and open it up and you put some of that toxin on there. So we look at the lighter shuriken, the smaller shuriken, a lot of times that stuff was a delivery mechanism for a poison.
Poison, yep.
right? And so you start going through and looking at that, and I always wind up having issues with people espousing, the lethality of this or the lethality of that, and we wind up with this thing where you're repeating it because I said it, and I said it because my teacher said it. My teacher's teacher said it because his teacher's teacher said it. But what we wind up realizing is, yeah, but nobody's done this. Nobody's actually seen this work, and we don't understand what the mechanism of action is. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we're not going through and in a society in which we have to go through and be, canceling birth certificates with a throwing spike, right? Probably for the best. But we need to be able to go through and think logically about what would actually stop that. And so shuriken, the needle ones, it's really fun to throw them. It's a distraction or it's a delivery mechanism for poison. And I hate to break this to you, if you're walking around carrying a poisoned throwing spike, it's not a good look, right? Like there's a whole variety of ways that this will go really bad for you.
Yeah.
Just if you're like, out and wind up having a cursory search and they wind up figuring out that you're carrying a throwing knife or throwing spike that's poisoned. I don't know about your laws, but I can tell you that mine are they will invent a new law just for me for that.
Yeah, in Canada,
right?
They would.
Oh, bro. Right? Shoot someone with a poison bullet and see how that goes for you. Right? Like, so going through and just kind of being aware as to cyanide would not be as well suited. Cyanide works better when you digest it. It's taken orally because it reacts with the acid in your stomach, produces prussic acid or hydrogen cyanide, and you turn your body into a gas chamber. So when you breathe it in, you start going hypoxic because it does that. Blowfish toxin, or if you did like a nicotine extraction, it might work better, but blowfish toxin probably. But also going through and looking at that time, like lockjaw, what was called lockjaw or tetanus, right? The fact that something, was covered in dried shit or rusty and was going to cat scratch fever, stuff like that, right? Like there's a whole bunch of things that due to modern medicine, we don't die, but I mean, getting tetanus was a bad day, right?
Yeah.
So going through and just understanding why it is that those things work in that self-defense situation is very, very important. And I think overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, man. Shit, dude, we're rolling up on 2 hours. That was a quick 2 hours, actually. This one went much better. I'm glad my Wi-Fi was decent this time because I was gonna get really angry. But thanks for chatting with me, dude. I really appreciate it. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I learn something every time I talk to you. It seems like, and yeah.
I'm the best partner you'll ever have for Trivial Pursuit, I tell you.
Hey man, I just want to thank you again for sponsoring me and being a good friend to me, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's something that I've really enjoyed. At the beginning, you had asked me about what it is that Delta 2 Alpha does in the throwing community, and my goal for being involved in the throwing community is to bring in more throwers. So I want D2A to be a hub, and I want it to be a very approachable way for people to get that are interested in throwing to be able to start. So we have, coming up to 100 different options for a bunch of different makers, and someone can show up. They don't have to buy in sets of 3. They can buy one. They can try out. They can get started. And so when you're first coming into the scene, what do you do? What do you buy, right? And so we want to go through and first and foremost be able to give the best service that's out there. Be able to, right, the curse and the blessing that I have doing it is I can throw and have to throw and be able to throw well 100 different knives. I have to be able to do that. So what's the likelihood I'm going to be able to throw at 10 meters no spin consistently? Not very, because I have to throw 100 different knives. Right? I can pick up anything and make it stick at 3 or 4 meters. Doesn't matter what it is. But to specialize in getting further out.
So when someone isn't sure what knife to get, I'd say, well, what type of thrower are you? Right? And we have Russian stuff, we have, you know, stuff from Opus, we have stuff from Asia, we have a whole variety of different things. And somebody might say, oh, well, you know, like we're taking over the throwing scene or whatever. I disagree. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think that somebody coming into throwing, they may start with us. And they say, oh, you know, I got really good service and, you know, I did that. But now they're into throwing, they got that knife to start, and now they're throwing, they're starting. And then they go over and they're like, oh, you know, I really like those clip point dashes that, you know, Lewis Prince does, or, you know, Nobody Knives is doing something different, or, right, who's got like great presentation, by the way. Like his Instagram is very unique in the way that he does it. It's a lot of fun.
Very.
Right? You go through and you look at, you know, Bill Bednarik with Truebell, right? If you're into classic rotational stuff, Bill's got that on lockdown. Flying Steel has their own flavor.
A huge pillar of the community forever. And he probably makes the best in the world as far as quality.
Meticulous. Yeah. Absolutely. You're talking Flying Steel?
What's that?
You're talking Flying Steel?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Yeah.
Oh, Patrick.
Absolutely meticulous with his metallurgy, everything. And he does great work. So, you know, Opus Knives, right? There's the Throwing Zone. There's, you know, Kim Vitale.
There's over 100 knife makers now,
tons,
literally.
Tons. Yeah. And so I look at it as I want to make it easy for someone to come into the world of throwing. And we have a bunch of variety. If you want to be right, you're interested in shuriken, you're interested in axes, you're interested in no spin or half spin, or right, we got some rotational stuff coming up. You'd made the good point that, hey, we're kind of sucking hind tit on rotational. You're right. So we have a couple throwers that we're going to be doing. Right, we've got one of the works with you. Got a couple others in the works. Going through and bringing axes in, and so going through and giving great service, great prices, fast shipping. But the other side of it is variety. The other side of it is knowledge, right? If you don't know where to start, what should you start with? Well, what type of throw do you want to do? I just kind of want to play around, try a bunch of stuff. Cool. Spets 3 Pro Large, great place to start. Start there, right? Or Nomads are a great place to start if someone wants to start with no spin, right? I really want to just like do a lot of half spin. Okay, the Abro is really good if you want a general knife, right? So being able to go through and help someone and steer them towards that. But once they're throwing, how many people that throw have one knife or one kind of knife?
No one.
Right? It's not a zero sum game. Someone coming into the throwing world the throwing community becomes a thrower and therefore a client for everyone. And when somebody asks me about, you know, someone else's work or something like that, like they're like, oh, you know, like whose stuff do you really like? And I was like, I really like the look of those talismans, right? Or, you know, like Lewis's clip point dashes, right? There's some people that it's like an extension of their will, right?
It's a sexy knife, yeah.
They're really good, right?
Yeah.
And so going through and it's like, it's not coming in and taking over. It's going through and making it so it's easier for people to come in and have it be a hub.
Yeah.
But with that said, when there's a throw going on, somebody hits us up, we send prizes out, we send stuff like that. We want to be an active member of the community. Yeah. So
I really appreciate that. And people watching, I think that I've heard someone say, well, the prices are a little expensive. You got to keep in mind, those are fucking weird ass Canadian prices. So.
Oh, fuck you, they're expensive, right? It's 30%. One Canadian dollar is $0.7 US, right? Like, no, oh yeah, it sucks. And when I got to pay for stuff in euros, right? One Canadian dollar is like 0.65 euros.
Damn.
Yeah, so it's like
the other thing people need to keep in mind is you are now a hub for all the European countries or knife makers. So
a lot of them.
It's much cheaper getting it through you in North America, right?
Well, and we bring, like, we have Russian stuff, right? We are able to bring in the Kim Vitale stuff. Occasionally, we're able to get the Scamp stuff. Authorized resellers of both. And again, if somebody wants to go through and get just one knife, they don't have to get a set of 3.
That's very cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And Matt, the shipping is also in Canadian dollars. So if it says it's $20, it's actually like less than 15, right? So it's honestly the biggest thing holding us back is that we are in Canadian dollars, so everything appears to cost more than it does. And then people wind up getting to the checkout and they're like, wow, that was actually way cheaper than I thought.
Yeah.
Which is different than when I took my dog to the vet today and they told me it was $1,000. Cocksuckers. I'm like, you're glad I love you because Jesus, I was a kick in daddy's coin purse, you know.
Well, dude, thanks so much for doing this interview. I thought this one was really good. It might have been our best one yet. And I'm looking forward to
Matt, it's okay. You're not that cheap, you know? It's fine.
I've met Matt. He's all right. He's all right.
He's a great dude. Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks again, Ace. I'll talk to you soon, dude.
Yeah.
Peace.
Cheers. Thanks, boys, for listening.